Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 9 of Social Anxiety Life. We want to say a big thank you to anyone who's been listening to our episodes. We've had some 5-star reviews on Spotify and a couple on Apple Podcasts. So thank you if you've left a review or a rating. We're really grateful for all of the support. So today our topic is around therapy. The reason we've chosen this topic today is because in our Facebook group, we did a poll and 50% of people said that they have had some kind of counselling or therapy for their social anxiety, while the other 50% said that they have not had any kind of counselling therapy. For this episode, we're going to use the words counselling and therapy sort of interchangeably. Counselling is a form of therapy, but we will probably be using both words today. Right, should we get started? So I think Simon and I have both had experiences with therapy, but we've had quite different experiences. So do you want to get us started?
I think it's useful, first of all, to talk about what we think counselling or therapy is for the context of this episode. And I think it's useful to think of counselling and therapy as a method of dealing with and developing coping mechanisms associated with social anxiety. I think also counselling aims to help people to challenge their negative thoughts. So if you particularly related to our episodes on overthinking, I think counselling is a method for helping you to clarify those and move forward. I think also there are different forms of counselling and therapy as well, which we've both had different forms of it. And I think those experiences are going to be very useful for clarifying and developing for listeners what's happened and how it's benefited us.
Yeah.
I think it's useful, first of all, to think about what to do before any sort of counselling therapy sessions have happened. So almost thinking about like the referral process. How do you refer yourself? What happens? How long does it take? Is it quick? I suppose that depends on how you're feeling at that particular moment. If you've decided that counselling or therapy is for you and you want help, then there's different ways I think you can do it.
Yeah.
I think for me, the 3 periods I've had of therapy have all been very different. My first block of therapy happened in 2004, 2005. That was centred around how I was feeling at the moment, not specifically to do with social anxiety, but particularly centred around periods of depression, feeling upset. And I referred myself privately for somebody. My second period of therapy was bereavement therapy, and that happened through my workplace. My third period of therapy was through work as well. And I'd like to probably reflect on the third one because it's the most recent one.
Yeah.
And the third period of therapy relates to something that I've spoken about in a previous episode where I was at a place of work. It didn't feel right. I didn't understand why it wasn't right. So logically for me, therapy was the way forward. And the place of work had support networks in place, which I accessed. And the first stage was a phone call. And you talk about why you want therapy, why you think you need it, what you hope to get out of it. And they process that information and try and match you with a suitable therapist. Because I think like the relationship you have with that therapist is key, because you're going to be talking about potentially quite deep, meaningful things. And it's almost fear of the unknown. You're not quite sure what you're going to be talking about or what's going to come out of it. But I think it's very clear and very necessary for you to have those aims and thoughts in your mind for it to be beneficial.
Absolutely.
I think that therapy, I term it more sort of cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yeah.
But I believe your route was slightly different to mine.
Yes. So my experience has been with talking therapy or talk therapy. And the way that I went about that was I actually got a leaflet through the door. And it just so happened at the time that I was really struggling with my social anxiety. I think because I was just in a period of time where I was very busy and I was being put in a lot of situations that were bringing up my social anxiety. So looked at the leaflet, decided I'd go on the website, and then sort of, I guess, put in an application. I don't know if that's the right word. And then I had to fill out a form. So it was quite a long form. It was asking me lots of questions about what sort of anxiety I have, what makes me feel anxious. I had to rate statements. So they gave me lots of statements and I had to say sort of 0 to 10, how much anxiety would that situation give me. And then within a few days, I heard back, I had a phone call, and then it kind of started going from there.
So was that process quite quick, or did it take longer than you thought it would?
Actually was a lot quicker than I thought. I was expecting maybe for it to take a few weeks, but I think from getting the leaflet to actually getting the phone call was maybe a week and a half. So it actually happened really quickly for me.
I found very similar that if I was self-referred or someone else referred me, the starting process was quick.
Yeah.
I think then it makes sense to look at, once you've almost been accepted, it feels like if you've been accepted for counselling or therapy and then the proper sessions begin,
Yeah.
the therapist or counsellor they almost need to measure, they need a numerical measure or maybe a non-numerical measure of the impact of their work.
Yeah.
And I found that every time that I've done it, you have as you said, you have statements that you rate out of 10, or it's from what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I found that the end of each session with the third lot of counselling, you had to measure how you were feeling at particular times. There was the same questions every time.
Right.
To measure impact. But I think for me, it's what I spoke about within that time, because it started off I found it quite difficult to really let go and really say what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Because it's almost fear of we've talked about overthinking before. It's like, what do they think?
Yeah.
But people are going to think anyway.
Yeah.
But the therapist won't tell you what they're thinking because that's not the aim of it. They are going to listen to what you're saying. They give you the space to say what you need to say. And then it's almost as they're talking, they've got to inflect back what you're saying and then think of another question to get you to think more deeply about it.
Yeah.
So I know I had actually had a recent session with my therapist, because I've kept her number, I've kept in touch with her as I need to, and they've said I can contact them whenever I want. And usually if I need something, it's within 24 hours that I get an appointment. And there was something particular I needed to speak to her about, because a few weeks ago I had really difficult night's sleep. I couldn't get a lot of sleep because I was overthinking about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And my strategies that I developed with my therapist a while ago hadn't worked this time. And it's unusual because they usually work.
Yeah.
But this time it didn't. And I just needed that forum, that space, just to let it all out for them to think about, to accept what I'm saying. And then the questioning that the therapist gives is really good, because it's designed to make you really think and really get to the crux of what it is.
Yeah. So your therapy sessions, were they phone calls? Were they in person, over Zoom?
I've had a mixture of forums. So the first lot of therapy I had was in person.
Yeah.
I used to go to the person's house every week, and she had a particular room that all the therapy happens in. My bereavement therapy was at a particular building within the local authority. And then my last lot of therapy has been online.
Yeah.
I think the online form of therapy is interesting because I think the fact you're talking through a screen, you've got almost a buffer there for when you're talking. So I actually felt more relaxed talking to the counsellor about what I needed to speak to them about. And it's almost that it got to the point where at the start of the earlier sessions, I sort of didn't know what I wanted to speak about. but she would always ask the same question: how's your week been? How are you feeling?
Yeah.
They're open-ended, so it gives you a real shot at just getting in there with how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And it would change, because
Would,
sometimes the day before I'd think I feel really awful,
yeah.
But then the next day I'd be thinking, actually, I want to speak about this. So then increasingly I took ownership of the session itself,
Yeah.
and I was really clear on what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, because that was a question I was going to ask for anyone who's not had therapy, is sort of how much is it led by the therapist? Are they just sort of asking you lots of questions, or do they just sort of sit there and wait for you to maybe start talking?
I have had therapy where they've just sat there
Yeah.
and you're just expected to start talking. That I find
I was
difficult.
going to say that sounds like quite challenging.
It is, because sometimes I've just sat there and I've openly said, I don't know what to talk about.
Yeah.
Because then that puts the emphasis back on them, because they're the expert. They're the person, or the people who know what they're talking about. So it's almost right. I need you to tell me, give me a question to start with,
Yeah.
because I can't just sit here and talk about
I'll just go
any
straight
old
into
thing.
it. Yeah.
But it's almost they're the best. Some of the best things happened when there was a very open-ended thing to start with, and it's almost keeping in your mind what's the aim of the therapy, what do you hope to get out of it yourself.
Yeah.
And within that therapy, it's when you focus in on the social anxiety, I think for me a lot's come out. I don't know if you felt the same in the shorter process that you've had.
Yeah, so my experience is quite different with the talk therapy. So once I got the phone call, basically I had to sort of have this online account, and there were things that I would have to read. So there'd be sort of paragraphs of text or stories that I'd have to read. And then I could sort of do another little poll to say how I was feeling, what my anxiety level was like. And then I would get kind of a phone call check-in. And I think I did actually 3 sessions in the end. And then I stopped them because for me, I wasn't getting what I needed out of it. So for me, it very much felt like I was reading all these texts and all this information about what is anxiety, how might it make you feel, and I felt like I already knew all of that. And what I really thought the talk therapy was going to be was more what you had, actually talking with someone and kind of really trying to delve into my anxiety and work through it and learn more about myself and coping mechanisms. And I wasn't really getting that from the talk therapy. So for me, I ended up doing the 3 sessions, and then I stopped it because I could see that I wasn't really benefiting. But having said that, I know people who've done the talk therapy who they've loved it and it's been amazing for them, but it just didn't work for me, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Do you think potentially then there's a gap there in the market? It's almost there's a gap in the market for, it's almost some kind of, because I find social anxiety is quite specific.
Yeah.
And when I speak to my therapist or counsellor, I'd like to discuss very specific examples with how I've, before an event, during the event, after an event.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed having that forum just to explore that.
Yeah.
And I know we've discussed quite a few examples within these podcasts about how we've felt before an event, during an event and after an event.
Yeah.
They almost give another perspective on those things. And I feel that counselling or therapy, almost it gives a name to the sort of feeling at the time.
Yeah.
So, for example, we've spoken about quite a few things where it's almost it's worst case scenario. Is you've gone to something and you're really thinking about, this is the worst thing that's going to happen is I won't know what to say, won't know what to do. People are going to think less of me because I can't contribute to the conversation. And it's almost now, I think you said it on the last episode, it's about flipping the narrative to a more positive, a positive one.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop the anxiety from happening. It's always going to happen, I think. But there are times now where they're more, they have a more positive slant on it.
Yeah. As we wrap up episode 9, we hope you've gained valuable insights into the power of therapy for social anxiety. Exploring specific examples and discussing our experiences before, during, and after events has provided us with a deeper understanding of our own thought patterns. In our next episode, episode 10, we'll be delving into the topic of self-care strategies for social anxiety. So we hope you join us in the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to Social Anxiety Life.